So it's the time for the Q&A session. So please write down your questions, the participants who are online, if possible, indicating the name of the presenter to whom you are pointing the question at. And you can use the raise hand facility or the Q&A facility. And our organizational team will present those questions to the panel. Whereas the audience over here at BMICH will identify yourselves by name and point your question orally to our panel. So let me invite online Mr. Saliya Wickramasooriya and Mr. Nalin Gunasekara to join us to the panel discussion. And over here in person, let me invite Dr. Nadun Alwis and Engineer Rohan Senevirathne, and also Mr. Richith Kandage to join me in the panel discussion. Please come over. And the audience over here, please always speak to the mic, which is connected to the sound system, so that the online participants can also hear your voice when you raise a question. I will continue to sit here so that I can see all of you. Please. Good. Because of the time constraints, we have about half an hour for the Q&A session, which is substantial. So let's make the best out of this session. So may we have the first question, please? Yes, Engineer Shamindranath Fernando, past president of SLEMA, is raising the first question.
Yeah, I have been always saying that this has been one of the best. Again, I do not be saying that again and again and again, but all that I want to say is SLEMA has been putting out a very good show every year of the caliber that we had today. And for a moment I was thinking, that was in Sri Lanka or somewhere else, listening to an international panel of experts. That is the quality of present, not to brag you or boast you or to uplift to that standard. What I am trying to get at is this. Even yesterday I have been telling this, Sri Lanka does not lack talent. The knowledge, the wisdom, and the education. You just saw it, we have enough of it. Enough of it in every sphere, be it mostly Sri Lanka's expats or Sri Lanka's in-house. And very rightly so, Sri Lanka's in-house, in the caliber of Rohan, had enough expertise to share with us from the power sector. And some of you guys, thanks maybe to the COVID, you're stuck here. And others are helping us from abroad. But the only advice I can give you at this moment of time is let's pool in, including what we heard the last presenters, enormous amount of experience. And starting with Saliya, who had a lot of work at the PRDS. Let's pool in all our resources and work for a LNG, if it has to be, future, not only for the power sector. You saw the power sector alone is a huge player. But today we all concentrate on the power sector. But there is still another, at least a little bit, maybe 10%, 20% out there in the industrial and more so in the transport sector. How you convert that to transport sector is another story. Why can't we have LNG and then also electrify the railways? Is another problem. So these are huge jigsaw that we are trying to put together. We have the right pieces. What we don't do is put the right piece at the right place and make a beautiful picture. This is all I got to say. I don't want to take any of your time.
Thank you very much. Let me convert that to a question, Mr. Rohan Senevirathne. Non-power users. So I'm sure there are industry groups, maybe their demand is much smaller than CBs, and perhaps in a small way transportation. Will they have access to the gas when your regasified LNG is available on 31st December 2023? I've given you a date.
I have to do it before 20th September 2023.
All right, that's better. Okay, about the non-power users.
Well, there are non-power users. When you look at the other countries, there are quite a sizable non-power users who use natural gas for various activities. When you look at Sri Lanka, the biggest customer for the moment is power sector for the electricity generation. But there are other users, potential users as well, like industries. Industries can use natural gas for various activities, especially furnaces and various other things. So if we can give natural gas to industries, so there is a possibility that industrialists will use natural gas for their activities. At the same time, if we can convert some of the vehicle transportation to natural gas, so there will be some more users to come. In India, in certain sectors, I have seen in New Delhi, Mumbai and various places, there are gas converted vehicles they are used natural gas. But if you go to a country like Australia, there is a pretty good domestic demand for natural gas, because almost all the houses in Australia are connected with a gas network. So that the gas that we use for various activities in households in Australia and many other countries for that fact are driven by natural gas. But when you look at the Sri Lankan picture, we have to see how we can attract more customers for natural gas. Definitely the power sector we have already discussed, that's a solid market. Solid demand is there from the power sector, that is fine. Then if you look at the domestic sector in Sri Lanka, we have to really look at the feasibility of having gas networks to doorsteps of houses, that's the pipelines to your home. So those are little challenging scenarios, and we have to see whether we can generate any demand from households for natural gas. But the potential area is for industries. Now, even when we were designing this project for the power sector, we kept adequate room even in the undersea cables, sizing of the FSRU and the onshore receiving station, to give more gas, especially to Katunayake Free Trade Zone. So that it's a possibility to lay a pipeline from Siyambalapitiya to Katunayake and to give natural gas for the industries in Katunayake. That's a possibility. And also some possibilities are there to make the natural gas, CNG, and to transport by various other means to various industries in the middle of the country or somewhere in some other location. So that is also a possibility. So there are various possibilities and we have to look into. But if you take the total big picture of the primary energy of Sri Lanka, I think many of you are aware that the electricity sector is only 12% of the total primary energy of the country. It's very small. 88% is outside the electricity sector. Now, even if we have 30% of electrical energy generated from natural gas by 2030, the total big picture is affected only by 4%. So there is enough adequate opportunities are outside. So I think it is not the business of the CEB to create that market. Some other agencies will have to look at the possibilities and to create markets for that. And the vehicle, of course, creating a vehicle market, perhaps it's challenging now because everybody is going for electric vehicles. So that the gas converted vehicles are not in the business that much. But in the end, what we can do is if we can have more and more electric vehicles, and more industries converted to electricity because of the prices coming down and things like that, then what will happen is electricity demand will go up. If electricity demand is growing up, then we can have more and more combined cycle power stations feed by natural gas. Then the consumption will go up. So a lot of areas to discuss. There is no one answer. So a lot of areas to brainstorm.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive answer. Let's take, just before Mr. Engineer Parakrama Jayasinghe, we will take a question from our online audience. This question is to Mr. Richith Kandage. The question is from Mr. Lilantha Neelavala. What would be the conversion cost of existing oil-based power plants to gas? I don't know whether we are asking the question from the right presenter. Perhaps maybe anybody in the panel can give you the response to that.
I'm not privy to that.
Well, yeah, I will volunteer to answer that question. Actually, there are two power plants in Kalintis. One is 165 megawatt CEB owned combined cycle power plant. Other one is also 160 megawatt Sojitsu private owned power plant. So those are the only two power plants we wanted to convert to natural gas, because the Ceylon existing power plant is dual fuel. So there is no need to convert that. That can be directly connected with natural gas. So when we want to convert the existing plants, existing two combined cycles to natural gas, we have to do certain changes with the original equipment manufacturer, OEM. And it takes time for planning, time for procurement, time for implementation, and it has a cost also. Approximately, it's around $10 million to convert 165 megawatt combined cycle power plant to dual fuel.
All right, thank you very much. The answer is about $10 million per power plant of 165 megawatt each. Yes, Engineer Parakrama. We don't hear you off the mic. Just concerned.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Fine.
Thank
Fine. I've not learned this. Well, Rohan answered to some certain extent what point I was going to raise is particularly that we are, say, sort of, world has changed so much since we started talking about LNG and also the market for LNG. At the original discussion, I'm sure transport was also considered to a great extent. But that has changed. Mr. Rohan already mentioned that. And you must keep in mind, we should make that jump from converting petrol engines to gas, keeping in mind this main efficiency values. Internal combustion engine has less than 20%. Electric vehicle can have more than 80%. And now, the world over, that change is happening. And I must also mention, how she is here, the latest energy policy document says by 2022, 20% of our light vehicles should be converted to electric. And there should be 25 charging stations by 2020, right? So we are also in that trend. I'm very pleased to see that one. We must have a national policy of conversion of all transport to electricity. And I think I mentioned to Rohan some time ago also, CEB should be a little embarrassed to say that we are still providing only 11% of the total energy. It has a much greater potential. Of course, LNG or CNG or whatever it is targeting the industrial sector is something that we should consider. But your target should be, like quite rightly said, enhancing the power generation. And using electricity, I don't have to tell you, electricity is the most preferred form of energy. So let's keep that focus. Let's not go backwards. You see, talking about conversion of transport to LNG is now gone. We really should not be thinking about it or even talking about it. We really should be looking at enhancing the proportion that electricity serves in the primary energy. And definitely transport is happening now. Unfortunately, the government policies are very vague in this one, goes up and down. You remember some time ago, there was a spurt of interest in getting the electric vehicles, came down, little bit picked up, again come down. But this is the time to make a change, and it's, I think, up to the CEB to promote that one, so that your kitty becomes important. And as you know, what happened a couple of days ago is a very good signal. That's the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a specific question or is it?
No, I think that's what I want to say, that in your plan, are you planning to have transport as one of the sectors which can govern it?
Can you ask? Would you like to? Yes, yes.
So when you look at the global LNG markets, and especially on the natural gas markets, what you see is there are price points at which each industry becomes feasible. Not necessarily going and telling specifically for our country, but at certain price points, certain industries are feasible. For example, if you take petrochemicals, if the feedstock, the natural gas, is roughly around $1 to $3 per MMBTU, that's extremely profitable. So then you go to transportation, it could be between $7 to $10 per MMBTU. Then you do offshore bunkering, it will be at a certain price point. I can't remember. Then city gas, those price. There is another price point. So there are certain price points at which each industry becomes feasible. So what we have to do is when we have natural gas or we have regasified natural gas, then we have to see whether these are profitable or viable entities for us to enter. Because we are getting the landed price of LNG or natural regasified gas at our battery limits will be around $10, say for example. At that point, what are the industries which are feasible? There could be feasible industries. There definitely have to be feasible industries. Those are the ones that we should engage in. That is how we should nurture the downstream structures. And then once we have that, and when we have our own natural gas, then we can go into much more economical, viable, and much more robust industries like petrochemicals. Petrochemicals is extremely profitable. If you look at it, then because we have, I mean, I'm not a chemist again, pardon me, you have methane. Methane could be converted to ethane. Ethane could be converted to ethylene. Ethylene could be converted to polyethylene. Polyethylene could be converted to polypropylene. And there are massive plants, petrochemical plants in the world running into billions of dollars, and they have huge margins. I have inside information. I work for a petrochemical plant. It went from a $200 million loss-making entity to a $1 billion profit-making entity within a span of 8 years. And it was shipping one 40-foot container every 3 minutes on a 24/7 basis. That's what we should aim for in our country. That is what our intention of introducing LNG has to be.
Thank you very much. Let me take another question from an online participant. Ms. Preeni Vithanage asked the following question from Mr. Nalin Gunasekara. What are the post-pandemic risks for LNG projects? Mr. Gunasekara, do you envisage any COVID-related changes in the market?
Yes.
In the shorter term, perhaps in the longer term as well?
They have a very, very great concern right now. I think if you read the newspapers, you will see probably. You see, the biggest concern is with CO2 emissions from LNG production, which has come into the forefront now, because what we expect is that there will be a carbon tax, not only in the developed countries, but in the underdeveloped countries as well. Now, this is the view of Shell, Chevron, and Woodside as of this week. And they are very concerned about this. And that's why there is a write down on their assets down right now. And now, there are not a single LNG project took FID this whole year. This was reported yesterday. That when we checked up, not a single LNG project was reached FID. That means no new projects on FID, no new gas projects. And drilling is now down by, I think the last number I thought was 1/3 of the drilling has been share values have dropped. Some of the Oceaneering is, I think, one of the drilling contractors is gone to the wall now. So drilling is gone now. So a lot of the gas developments have been shelved. The biggest gas development here, Browse, $35 billion, was shelved till 2023. They said they will revisit it, but we don't think it will ever come back, because without the gas, but the gas prices seems to be fairly safe. At yesterday when we checked up at the last year 2009 gas prices that we paid was between 2 and 3 for spot cargoes and between 7 and 8 for contracted cargoes on a 50-50 basis, 50 spot and 50 contracted cargoes. So we think that will carry on for the next 2024. But beyond that, we have no hope in hell where it's going to go. And particularly because of this carbon capture and storage.
Let me ask you a follow-on question. Is this a good time then to float a bid so that there will be a lot of people?
That is what I have a slide on that, which I couldn't show.
You think it's a good time? It's good for Sri Lanka?
You see, because you have to get into risk mitigation, because there are aggregators and LNG suppliers who are looking to share the risk, and also the banks. Now, I have 3 sheets of what the banks want, which I couldn't show. That is probably the most valuable part of my presentation, because what do the banks want? Because ultimately, it's the banks and the insurance companies to take the risk. You see, the buck stops with them. Insurance companies, buck stops with them. What are the risks that we can insure? These are the things that we need to study. And these are the things which you are not going to get from consultants. You can go to all the consultants. You're not going to get anything. You can go to PWs. You can ask them questions. They don't know the answers because they're not in this business. This is our business.
Good.
So,
thank you very much for your beautiful explanation. I have another question from an online participant before I move on back to the audience over here. A participant is asking, he has not directed it to any person. Is there any possibility of establishing anchoring NG users other than electricity to absorb the oversupply during the wet season? Perhaps I think this is again the question to you, Rohan.
So demand for LNG, we have calculated based on the forecasted dispatching schedules by our generation planning engineers, but we are not going to go for long-term contracts. So Indians have done that mistake, and the Japanese, many have gone for 20-year contracts with oil indexing, and they are stuck with those things. And we managed to stop that exercise. It was almost forcing on us, but we managed to stop that and to go for tendering system, and not to go for long-term contracts, but to go for spot plus 1 year or 1.5 year contracts. So we can mitigate that risk when we do know the weather patterns. Then we can change the spot, because there is anyway base load for the LNG driven power plant. So those things we can go for 1.5 year contracts. But whatever changes due to weather, we can take from spot. So that that way we can mitigate the risk of oversupplying of LNG and to have the penalties on take-or-pay contracts. So I think that we can manage. So we have studied this very well, and we decided that, of course, there were consultants, true, PwC was there, but most of the things went into the design of this project are our brains actually. Those are sometimes common sense. You don't want to be a specialist, very specialist, to decide on certain common sense, because specialists miss the common sense sometimes. So if you have some experience of doing projects, and if your brain works, and if you know the power sector, if you know the Sri Lankan ecosystem, political systems and things like that, we can do a lot of best things for the country. So we went that way and designed our project.
Good, thank you very much. It looks like our online audience is more active than the physical audience here. I'm getting a lot of questions, but let us open the floor to the participants over here. Yes, yes, please. Please state your name and then your question. And if you're directing it to anybody in particular, either here or online, please let us know.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Veditha De Silva. The sector I'm representing is the petroleum sector. My question is open to any one of the panel. What I'm asking is, what is the regulatory framework for implementing an LNG project in Sri Lanka? Because we have the CPC, the Petroleum Act of 1961 and the subsequent acts for the petroleum industry. But when it comes to LNG, we've not been able to see anything like that. Why I'm asking this is, I think Mr. Kandage and Dr. Nadun Alwis will both agree with me. Any international investor who is going to come is going to look at the compliance issues seriously. That's a serious risk. So what's going to support them with the legal framework in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I'm going to ask whether Mr. Saliya Wickramasooriya would like to answer that question, because he has been part of this development of the regulatory system in Sri Lanka more closely over the last decade. Saliya, are you there? Mr. Saliya Wickramasooriya? Are you there? Sorry, he doesn't. He seems to be disconnected. Can my panelists over here assist me as to what the regulatory structure would be, and is there any attempt? No.
I think.
Yes. Go ahead. Yes. Is Saliya? Hello.
Can you hear me now, Tilak?
Yes, Saliya. I'm not sure whether you heard the question.
I heard the question about the regulatory framework.
Yes, that's right. Can you enlighten us briefly on what's been going on over the last decade?
Yes, of course. I think that's one of the fundamental
Increase the
questions
volume.
on any investor's mind is how does their investment get managed or get regulated by the host country? And the regulation in this instance is divided between the upstream and the downstream sectors. The upstream sectors, there is a separate plan for regulation of upstream activities. The downstream sector is planned for regulation eventually by the PUCSL when they enact the petroleum products into their mandate. On the upstream side, the regulator is envisaged to be the Petroleum Resources Development Secretariat. The policy proposing this has been submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers. It's the first draft of our national gas policy, which articulates what I'm sharing with you now. And that is, it is proposing that the upstream sector, that is that sector that manages exploration, investment, and production sharing contracts and so on and so forth, is regulated by the PRDS, and the downstream sector by the PUC. I just want to say a couple of quick points here, because that question is important, because it's not just a policy that people will look at. The policy is quite easy to frame. The policy must be supported by law. So ultimately, whatever these policies propose to the international community as well as to Sri Lankans must be supported by law. So no sooner the gas policy gets approved, it must then be backed up by a revised statute, which mandates these organizations in their respective scopes. So the policy alone is enough. It's definitely the starting point for any investor, but it's not going to stop there. They need the policy to be translated into law before it can get possibly evaluated and implemented. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I suppose. Are you satisfied as to
Yeah,
what's been going
I'll
on?
go with that explanation. But my understanding is that as far as law is concerned, we are in limbo.
Sorry, we are in
limbo. We are just hanging. I mean, there's no bridging law.
There is no. I'm asking Mr. Rohan. Rohan, is this going to be a problem in what you are planning to do? The fact that we don't have a law, we don't have a gas authority, perhaps we only have a draft gas policy, if I remember.
Well, when you look at the other countries, it's always better to have the proper laws and the regulation on board, like now the power sector is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. As per my knowledge, as per the policy of the gas of the country, the gas sector also to be regulated by the PUCSL. And similarly to the petroleum, I think petroleum also not yet gazetted, I think, to the regulation, I believe. So those sectors also should come under the purview of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. It's better to have the regulation to encourage the investors for various development activities. It's a fact. But having said that, that we can make an attempt and see what would be the response of the investors for this particular area, because I can remember we started private power procurement, private power plants well before it's 23 years ago, and we were running 9 private power plants, IPPs, well before the regulation came into the picture. We were running private power plants. So there were investors, a lot of investors in the field, and they came and they invested. Then we were running the businesses. So in this LNG also, mainly for the first 5 years, actually, what the task is to provide LNG for the power plants actually. So in Japan and various other countries, the power plant is buying the LNG and regasifying and using. It's a one model. It's not going to the other sector areas. So I think for first few years of maybe at least 5 years, it is for power production. So whatever the experience that we have in CEB on managing these PPP businesses, we can use for this one as well. And also all these points that were highlighted by the last speaker, Mr. Gunasekara, on risk sharing, and also my colleague also shared various opinions on the risk sharing and business models and things like that. We have gone through almost all these areas, the areas we have gone through. That is why we spent 1 year with the consultants and specialist lawyers and so on. And still we are going through, and all these things have been addressed. So perhaps because of not having regulation can increase the risk a bit. So risk comes with the price. So perhaps we have engineers' estimates for FSRU. That is for the based on the output, actually gas output. So those things can go little here and there depending on the risk. When there is a risk, always you go for little high price. But at the end of the day, those things will not that much affect the final kilowatt hour price, because these prices are a very small portion compared with the kilowatt hour price that we are going to get out of the power plant. So still, and also these are coming around, say, 11, 12 rupees per kilowatt hour that we are envisaging, and on the oil we are talking about 30 rupees. So there is a huge gap in between. So we have to see and do and see, because we cannot wait till all these regulations come, and in practice it can take many more years, 4, 5, 6 years. So we cannot wait till then to start this project. So we will start and see how it goes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rohan Senevirathne. That also reminds me that before we had the Electricity Act, there was 14 years of renewable energy development. And there were about 200 mini hydro power projects operational, no Electricity Act, no regulatory commission. And they were doing very well. And whether that perhaps was improved after the Electricity Act, there may be some questions as well. Dr. Nadun Alwis has some comments.
Yeah, actually, if I may add a few things on the health and safety environment point of view for the regulatory framework. I think if you look at that, I can talk about a little bit towards the UK, how the setup being done. They are what you call the HSC, Health and Safety Executive. It's a very powerful body, and nothing can be done with their consent. I can give an example that there was a instance where that oil rig platform, you have the helideck, people transfer from the helicopter to the rig. And all of a sudden they found some structural defects of the helideck, which they found that helicopter cannot be landed. And then notification went to the Health and Safety Executive straight on. And then put the restriction, cease the production. If you cease the production, it's cost millions. So then, so that's that powerful. So I think we also need to gear towards that, because we are dealing with the safety critical items all the way through the supply chain. So Nalin Gunasekara, mentioned about that, how that exploded this power plant. And also I showed you some of the what happens, the Pipe Alpha and Gulf of Mexico, Deepwater Horizon, the oil spill, and etc. So every aspect related to this, the connections or the gear itself, they are very critical. And if there's a damage, the damage should be far more great, and it could cause severe consequences in the fatality point of view as well as the environment point of view. So I think we have authorities like CEA, we have other authorities, so we all need to join up. And I know that as a national, the policy document says NOC to be established. Through that, then there's a regulatory body, especially to take care of this aspect, is vital for us. I think otherwise we will be exposed for many risks, and also that will not a good aspects for attract investors in the future as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alwis. Any more questions? Yes, just if we can be quick.
So to answer your question, there are two things. One is the downstream structure and the one is the upstream structure. When you go to the upstream structure and regulation on that, there's a Petroleum Resource Development Act being developed during 2016 onwards. It did not become a law because the constitutionality test is still being pursued. One. And in that one, you have three areas. One is the regulation. The first thing is the setting of the strategy will be the PRDC. Petroleum Resource Development Committee, which is the apex body setting the strategy for the monetizing of hydrocarbons. Second is the PRDS, which will become the regulatory body of this. Third will be the formation of the National Oil Company, which will take on the equity share of the country, especially stemming out of the CAN's investment. So these are the tripartite regulation what we have. Then moving to the downstream structure, the natural gas policy, which I think Petroleum Ministry spearheaded, was almost done, and it is to go into the cabinet for approval. When you are outside the country, when you're looking at the country, the first thing what you look at is either the act or the regulation. So we took great care at the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to make sure that those things are included, giving the confidence for the investors to come in and this thing, including the visas and other things, what should be there and how you should regulate, what are the downstream structures, and if there are a number of multiple parties, how it should be having, what is the allocation rules, what are the price revision rules. Those are included into the policy document. I think it is at the final stage of crafting, which we see. That will be the document which will regulate the downstream structure. So you have to look at it in two ways.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, if you can be very brief, because there are so many other questions. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the comment. Let's go for another question. Yes, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Dhammika Nanakara, SLEMA member. I have two questions. First question goes to Mr. Rohan Senevirathne. Now, when the gas pipeline is coming from Ceylon to Kalanithis area, now due to this gas, we all discussed the safety issues. Do you foresee any resettlements, because it is very congested area from Ceylon to Kalanithis?
I think you can give a quick answer to that. Okay. Then we'll go to your second question.
Yeah, well, those are along the roads. So those are motorable, quite good roads that we are going to use to lay these gas pipelines. And if you go to any other country like Australia, each and every house is connected with a gas pipeline. So there is no hazard as such, because all houses are connected with gas pipelines. Those are going along the roads and the pavements. So the same thing that we are going to adopt here.
Fine, thank you. And your second question?
Okay, thank you. Then second question is now this FSRU is to Mr. Nalin Gunasekara. This FSRU is going to be a boot investment. He pointed out a lot of important aspects, but any investor, because government of Sri Lanka is not going to invest on this. Whoever the investor will invest. So in that case, the risks for the government is very low, isn't it? Because what I understood is he was explaining from the point of view, government is going to invest on the FSRU. In that case, then yes, government has to look at a lot of risk areas. But this is a boot project where
yes,
somebody else is investing.
That's right. Mr. Nalin Gunasekara, if you can give a quick response to this question. I hope you heard the question.
Can you repeat that question, please?
The question, if I summarize, is that if it is a BOOT, it
yes,
is BOO, the FSRU,
yes,
then
yes,
it's a private investor who is making the investment. Of course, the government or CEB will be paying some fixed fees
yes,
on top of the variable charge, I believe. So
yes,
therefore, don't you think
like
that the risks to the government is minimum when you have that kind of a project arrangement?
It's like this. The government has to give a payment guarantee to the lender. The contractor the lender will, because it's under limited recourse project financing, if you understand that, that's how these projects are done. So we will be giving an invoice as a vessel owner. We give an invoice at the end of the month, and for which we want payment for that directly going to a foreign bank. And again said, we want a payment guarantee from a creditworthy entity. Doesn't matter, as Richith explained. You see, it has to be a creditworthy entity. Now, the government of Sri Lanka is below credit investment grade. You see, so we want somebody to guarantee that payment for us and for a period of time.
Good. I think it's understood, Mr. Gunasekara. I'm sorry I had to, cut short the response.
Can I add a
yes,
small
you
thing
can be
on
very
that?
brief.
These payments are guaranteed by the government. Those are not sovereign guarantees, but guaranteed by the government through the implementation agreement. So we have to sign an implementation agreement with the project proponent, so that if CEB defaults any payment, the government will have to make that payment. So we have done those agreements. We are going to sign those agreements so that we want to make the investor comfortable on these areas.
Unfortunately, if the entity giving that guarantee is below investment grade, even a sovereign guarantee has very little value, unfortunately. Now, I was dealing with the government of Indonesia. Their sovereign guarantees have no value. We have to give a guarantee from a third party who is a joint venture partner outside Sri Lanka. Same thing in Myanmar. They are giving a guarantee from a party who is a party registered in Hong Kong. Same case in El Salvador.
Good.
A party outside El Salvador is giving a payment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunasekara. This is the last question we can take from the audience. I have several questions more from the online audience as well. Any last question? Yes, please. Over there. All right. Okay, Champika, I will allow you as well, since both of you raised your hands at the same time. Yes, please.
I'm Dr. Nilushan Modugamur. My two questions. First is for Mr. Gentleman from Australia. Sorry, I put your name. About the FSRUs, are they available ready-made FSRUs at the moment in the market? So if Sri Lanka goes for a bid, that they can supply quickly. And the next question is whether 2023 target, what is driven by, what is the drive for you to set a target for 2023?
All right. First question is for Mr. Nalin Gunasekara. Nalin, I want a very brief answer. The question is whether there are FSRUs available in the market, perhaps to meet our 2023 target, to be operational by 2023. Is there a good market? Is it available?
FSRUs are available, but if you ask for a tower yoke system that you have specified, very unlikely that's available, because there are no tower yoke systems which are available. But there are 7 FSRUs looking for homes. So if you leave the concept for the supplier to decide what the mooring system is, there may be one available. That is why when we think about FSRUs, we always leave the mooring system for the vessel supplier to decide.
All right. I think Mr. Senevirathne will give a follow-on answer to that question, as well as about the 2023 target.
Yes.
Well, the mooring system has to be designed as appropriate by the project proponent of the FSRU. It's a one contract, so that the FSRU person should bring the mooring system as well. We are not going to define any characteristics of the mooring system. It is up to the FSRU owner to come with the suitable mooring system. But we did our hydrological studies to understand the subject. We can provide a lot of available information from LHI and the force technologies, but we are not insisting on any type of the mooring system. Let the FSRU owner to come with the suitable mooring system. So there are no restrictions.
That is the way to tender. That is the best way to tender. You can.
That's a one tender, so that it's one tender. We don't want to have two tenders for FSRU and the other one. It's a one tender, so that one person has to take the full responsibility of the FSRU and the mooring system.
Good. Thank you very much.
That's good. Yes. And the delivery is 2 months if it's a conversion. If it's a new build, it's about 36 to 40 months.
Well, 2023 target is, if you can do it even before, it's still the better. Because we are
months also, but typically it's 18 to 22 months.
Yes,
depending on the
Actually,
mode.
procurement delay as
But that's for a conversion, not a new build.
yeah, I will quickly
Thank you.
explain it. And it is still better if we can get the FSRU because we have existing power plants so that we can connect with the existing 3 power plants if we can bring the FSRU even early. But you have to do a milestone chart and a time chart to see how much time that you require for this following the tender procedures. These are all government tender procedures. We did a comprehensive milestone chart to see where we can end up. There we provided time even to construct a new FSRU. Even the existing FSRU can bring, then it's fast and low cost. If it is not available, our timeline is even to construct a new FSRU and bring it back. So leaving times for each and every activity, we have calculated and see if we go along that path without obstacles to September 2023, but it's an enormous challenge.
30th September 2023. Yes, Champika, Champika, yes, Champika. Hello, get the microphone for him. But our online audience does not listen hear you. Where is the microphone? No.
Hello.
Yes.
Champika Periapuru, member SLEMA. Just a quick question to Mr. Rohan Senevirathne. It's good to see a lot of planning has been done, and if I catch some things from Mr. Kandage's presentation, it's a jigsaw puzzle which involves a lot of timing. So the FSRU has to come, the power plants have to come, and all has to synchronize in order to make a prudent investment. And probably this is a one-time investment, one-time project. So two things, the regulatory framework is important, unlike the renewable energy development where there are local investors who will continue to come and bid, and then we could get the regulation second. But this time we probably be one time one, so that is important. My question is, like, we have seen a lot of delays, not due to CB, not due to government intent, but due to external factors in implementing power projects. So when you get the FSRU and you have the system, right, whether we'll have the power plants also to match it, whether the tender document RFP has some provision to mitigate that sort of risk.
Yes, thank you. Question is very clear. A very brief answer.
Yeah, I will answer the second one first. I think about the power plants. So we have to have the proper lineup of new power plants to come to cater from natural gas. But we have at least 3 existing plants, 165 into 2 plus 300. Those can be converted to natural gas without much problem. That will come to about 600, 650 megawatts. That is solid. And then we are all about to finalize a 300 megawatt power plant, which has been pending for 2 or 2.5 years. Now we have come to the last stage of the legal observations from the Attorney General's Department for the final agreement, power purchase agreement. If it comes, we can award that contract within 1 month or so. Then within 2 years, the plant should come. And immediately after, we are going to advertise another 300 megawatt power plant for Siyambalapitiya. And that is also PPP project, $300 million, private-public partnership model, same arrangement. And then that also, if we can do it in 7-8 months' time, so by 2023, it should come. So our target is to have 2 number of 300 new power plants and to convert existing 3 power plants to natural gas. Then we have substantial amount of megawatts to run on LNG. That will save about 40 billion rupees if we can do that in 2023. So we have a very good plan. Only thing is there can be here and there problems, but I think everybody from the top to the bottom is fully aware about what we should do now. So everybody knows that. So I think we can do that. I think we should be able to do that.
Good. Thank you very much. For the last comment, Mr. Piasena. Please give him the microphone, please.
I just want to mention about some person asked whether there is a existing FSRUs available. For your information, I can tell you there's one idle FSRU at Turkey, which is available at any time. I think this may be the one that somebody earlier had some plan to bring it for our generation.
Fine. Thank you very much. There are so many questions coming online, but I'm sorry, we don't have time to take all of them. I think there is a question which needs only one word answer. It's from Ishan Jayasekara. What would be the expected levelized final cost from LNG based electricity generation in Sri Lanka? Rohan, if you remember this number. Mike, please.
Yeah, that depends on the LNG price.
Yes.
So it's different scenarios. If the LNG price is 4, it's a different answer. If the LNG price is 7, it's a different answer. So if we assume that the LNG price is $4 per MMBTU, so that should be the price to stabilize in the Asian market for a couple of years, according to information. If it is 4, then we have to add about 180 to regasify, and the FSRU and the piping system about 20 cents, the totaling to about 2. Then it will reach the power plant at $6 per MMBTU. In that case, we can generate a kilowatt hour somewhere around 11 rupees, 12 rupees in that region.
Fine, thank you very much. I will go around the 5 presenters for a final comment. Let me start off with Mr. Saliya Wickramasooriya. Your comment, please, but please be very brief.
Thank you, Tilak. Yeah, my comment is purely on risk. Translating it from the upstream down to the downstream, my observation is that for oil companies to make upstream investments, or for them to make FSRU investments, it is important that they price in all the risk of the project, and the risk of the project is captured in several places. You were referring to IPP PPAs. I think those are not the appropriate risk model, because their risk is highly limited and they're not exposed to market risk, technology risk, resource management risk, and all of that. So all I'm saying is it's quite important for us to get our risk identification and allocation correct ahead of time before we expect good bid performance from projects such as these, because they are certainly going to be looked at by the bidders. In other words, the gentleman who asked the question said, what if an FSRU comes and these things are not resolved? So my answer to that would be an FSRU will not come until the people who are providing that FSRU are convinced that such things are resolved. So I think there's a certain amount of planning we need to do quite aggressively now to de-risk this project for those people we expect to bid. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nadun, Alwis, for a short 1-minute comment, please.
Yeah, my comment and observation would be that it's great to know that the LNG in the pipeline in a lot of projects, and 2023 is the target. So we talked about midstream. So of course, there's other sectors which are upstreams and the downstreams. Of course, what I see is you cannot take this in isolation. So you need to think about a bigger picture, holistic view. You have a framework put in place, understand the economics, and I understand the viability, at least a good start. And then, but we also need to gear up to get our own resources, get into midstream, and perhaps downstream. So there's a big sector knowledge here. There's a knowledge gap. What I see is like, I actually did a presentation for another forum, and I asked simple questions. Do you have any experience on the oil and gas sector, especially? Very little, and very handful of people. But the country and the Energy Association and also the government should put a lot of effort to knowledge and get the people aware of that situation. There are so many job opportunities aligned that one. So let the other parties to participate, avoid the monopoly, and get the best competition in the country. That will give us a best possible scenario to move into LNG.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alwis. Mr. Rohan Senevirathne, your last 1-minute comment.
Yeah. Well, this LNG, introduction of LNG to power sector has been waiting for many years, and now it's come to a certain mature stage, and I believe it's a very important project for the country and project for the CEV. We have done very good work up to now, and that is with the support of the consultants and various other support. So we have gone through most of the places highlighted by the other speakers, the areas that they have highlighted, and also this is an investment by the private sector. We are not going to invest our own money for any of these things. These are complete investments. Therefore, investments should come with the proper price, including risk and all these things. So we can look at all these aspects, and we have to work very hard to achieve these targets of 2023. So we are working hard, and with the support of all of you and support from the government and support of the others, we hope we can materialize this at least by the end of 2023. So that is our intention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our good wishes. Mr. Richith Kandage.
From my point, I think with my experience with the government of Sri Lanka and other places, the two words I want to emphasize is financial closure and the bankability of the projects. We may sign any agreement, we may sign anything that's a commercial closure. It does not mean that we raise the required funding to do the EPC. If we do not have the right structures, right agreements, and right bankable products and agreements specifically, then you cannot see the day for a financial closure and raising the required funding. And if the other ancillary things are not in synchronized, then we will not achieve financial closure. So it's important to realize that the banks are parties who will give you an umbrella when it is not raining. They will not bear any risk for you. Trust me on that. And when you go to ask for millions of dollars, they will just turn you around. So you got to be careful, make sure you have identified the risk, make the project bankable so that we can achieve financial closure. And a lot of hard work has been done. I congratulate you, Rohan, for that work, and the CEB. Continue that work and make sure the project is financially closed, not commercially closed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kandage. It seems nobody is taking the risks, and we have to take all the risks. So, Mr. Nalin Gunasekara, I will allow you to have the last word. But unfortunately, my audience here is very hungry. We are still before lunch over here. So please,
easy.
1 minute.
This project is very easy because I'm speaking from a FSRU supplier's point of view. I've been one of them. We want to see where the money is coming from. It's very simple. If you can convince us that we are going to get paid, you will have a project. And that applies to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 FSRU suppliers who have done this before. Otherwise, you can go to some cowboy and get into business. Fine. That's it. And
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And many thanks to all the 5 members in the panel. And I'm sure my audience over here and our online audience agree that we had one of the best discussions that we have ever had on any subject and an emerging technology. And if I say there are 10 Sri Lankans who are knowledgeable on the subject, we certainly have 5 of them in this audience, in this panel. So there's nothing more that I would like to add at this moment, but I would like to remind the administration team to get the PDFs of all these presentations and send it to the participants, both here and online. And secondly, there are a few questions, particularly from the online audience, that I was unable to take them up. So you will have to send it to the relevant resource person and get a written response and send it to the person who has raised the question. So 2 things you have to do. So once again, thank you very much, and let's express our appreciation in the usual way.